This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FI Investment Group, and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business, politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Scott Beale. Scott is the founder and the CEO of a nonprofit organization called Atlas Corp. I was invited to be a keynote speaker about 2 weeks ago, and I want to express my deep gratitude to him for inviting me to talk to the Atlas Fellow. They came from all over the world, and they were the best. And I was very pleased to be there. So thank you for coming to the show, and thank you for your warm welcome, your hospitality, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Frank, very much for speaking to the Atlas Corp Fellows and for having me here today.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about who you are, how did you get started, what made you to start this nonprofit organization, Atlas Corp? What does it do?
Sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Atlas Corp. It's an international exchange program that brings the world's best social change leaders to the United States for 12 to 18 months to learn skills, share their perspectives, and ultimately head back home.
And how do you go about selecting these students, these fellows, and how do they know about you?
So all around the world, people go online to atlascorp.org and apply, and they learn about us from our partners with the U.S. Department of State, through nonprofit partners like Ashoka and ISIC, and they search, they Google search to learn about Atlas Corp. And last year we had about 10,000 people apply for 100 positions.
10,000 people for 100 positions. How many people did you select last time?
We selected almost 100 people last year.
But this year I noticed there was only 24.
Well, so we bring 4 classes a year.
4 classes a year?
Yeah, exactly. So it's
24 times 40 is 97, which is close to 100.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
Exactly, yeah.
So who pays for all these things?
So we are a nonprofit, but we're a social enterprise. So when I bring a environmental leader from Brazil to the World Wildlife Fund, they'll pay Atlas Corp about $35,000. Then I fundraise the rest, maybe a remaining 10 from philanthropists, from foundations, even occasionally from the U.S. government.
What about the question that I have, do you track these students when they go back to their country?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And you keep in touch with them to make sure they're doing what they were taught?
Absolutely. So
we have some success stories?
Absolutely. So we've had about 587 fellows from 87 different countries.
87 different countries?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're amazing.
And it's all over the world. Asia, Africa,
Europe, Canada, Syria.
Syria, yeah.
All
Middle
over.
Eastern countries, very good.
Yes, all over. You know, our theory is that talent exists everywhere in the world, but opportunity does not.
I agree.
And we want to give an opportunity to the world's best social change leaders to come and to learn, but also to serve, to share their perspectives, and to head back home.
And in my speech, I say it's a reverse Peace Corps. That's what that is.
Exactly. When I first described it to a friend of mine in India, because I was living in Delhi.
I wanted to talk to you about, you live in India, and your wife lived in Pakistan also. You lived. So what do you think of the art, culture, food, all the things about South Asia that you love?
Oh, I love South Asia. My wife speaks fluent Hindi, and we both served in the U.S. Embassy in Delhi. And we have so many friends in India and Pakistan. We love the food. In fact, we got married right after we lived in India, and we had a modified Sangeet as our rehearsal dinner.
Sangeet is what is a Sangeet?
So in India, I think a Sangeet is traditionally just women coming together the night before, but we had it as a rehearsal dinner with Indian food and Indian traditional clothes and everything but the elephant. We had an amazing wedding.
And how long did you live in India, and where did you live in India and Pakistan?
So 2 years in Delhi.
2 years in Delhi.
My wife spent a year in Islamabad, but I was only able to spend a few months there.
And your wife is a press person, and now she's stationed to Cuba. Am I correct? Her name is Courtney.
Yeah, her name is Courtney. She's a U.S. diplomat who has served all around the world, and her next assignment is Cuba, Havana.
And you just hang around with her?
I do. I follow her around the world.
Yeah. Now, what made you to start Atlas Corp? I know you work for President Clinton's administration also. What made you to do that, and what energized you to start this, Atlas Corp?
Sure, I'd worked with President Clinton, but also with Bill Drayden, the founder of Ashoka, before I served.
And who is this fellow?
So Bill Drayden is the founder of a nonprofit in Arlington called Ashoka.
Which is located in India?
Well, it's inspired by Indian NGO leaders, nonprofit leaders.
Ashoka is the Indian name?
The Indian king, exactly. Okay. And so Ashoka supports social entrepreneurs all around the world. So when I went to India, I met some of these Ashoka fellows. And I met some Indian men who were developing what they called an Indian AmeriCorps. or a domestic service program for Indians. A rising middle class of Indians go from Delhi to volunteer in Rajasthan. This made a lot of sense to me. But I thought, well, why are we just live in a world where Americans go to volunteer in India? Why couldn't Indians volunteer in the United States? I mean, Indians, of course, they come on H-1Bs and work at Microsoft. They come as doctors and as lawyers.
In all kind of profession.
In all kinds of professions. So around the world, if you are a talented business person, you can cross borders. If you're a talented student, you can cross borders. If you're a talented athlete, you can cross borders. But in the nonprofit sector, for so long, it had been Americans and Brits volunteering overseas without much thought of what we could learn from people from abroad. So that's what we set out to do.
Okay, so I'm an Atlas Corps fellow, and I remember talking to one of the girls, and she said she was going to San Francisco.
Yeah.
I don't remember her name. What exactly she will do during her stay for 18 months?
So for example, let's say she has a background in engaging young people in corporate social responsibility. Maybe she'll go and serve at Net Impact in San Francisco and teach business school students how they can be better CSR, corporate social responsibility individuals. It could be, we actually placed a woman from Korea at the mayor's office in San Francisco working on women's rights in San Francisco. They take their expertise, whether it's women's empowerment. We had a Pakistani woman who served at the Malala Fund here in DC, or it could be climate change or environmental awareness, coming to serve at the World Wildlife Fund, or even an LGBT leader from China who comes to the Human Rights Campaign. They bring their skills and expertise.
And I know one of them this year came from Tunisia, who's LGBT right person. Am I correct?
That's right. We have one.
Especially from a Muslim country.
It's these folks are
it's
amazing.
A challenge. It's a challenge for them.
The amazing folks.
So, what makes you different as a nonprofit organization? The Washington Post call you're the best nonprofit organization than any other nonprofit organization. And who's your competition in?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing that makes us different is that most international exchange programs tend to be short-term and tend to be people from the global north going to the global south. You know, I'm a believer of the Peace Corps. I'm a believer of serving over. I did it as a teenager myself. Not the Peace Corps, but I volunteered in Bosnia. And so I think that's important. But we're different in that we bring folks from overseas primarily to the United States. We're also different from most nonprofits because over half of our income comes from a fee structure, where organizations pay for these fellows, which allows our philanthropy to be essentially doubled by the organizations where they serve. So it's a very sustainable model that's going to allow us to grow to thousands of leaders.
It's a difference maker.
Exactly, exactly.
So when they go back to their respective countries, and they learn a lot of things from this country, they will be your spokesperson, they will be your ambassador. Do you tap upon and harness those resources to help you out to bring the next generation to the Atlas Corps Fellow?
You know, we do, but I don't consider them like my ambassador, Atlas Corps' ambassador.
So they're ambassadors, so-called social entrepreneurship.
Exactly. We really tell fellows when they join that they're joining a family, a community of people who are to be there to support them. Because, you know, the crazy people who believe they can change the world often feel alone. And they often feel disempowered, and people tell them to not go down that path. People tell them they will not be successful, and then they join a community of people who say, we'll be here for the rest of your life to support you. So those fellows, they go back, and they're incredible ambassadors for Atlas Corps. They're incredible advocates, because people want to be like them.
So how do they get back to the community in their country when they go back?
Well, the vast majority of them go back to the nonprofit, NGO, social sector.
So they don't come from the nonprofit organization?
Most do.
Most do?
Yeah.
So before they come at Atlas Corps Fellow from those part of the world, they already been engaged and involved, have a passion and commitment in terms of social entrepreneurship before they embark on a journey to come in this country.
Absolutely.
Am I correct to
you know,
assume
they have a college degree and usually 5 years of experience. But as you know, social change can exist in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, in the government sector. So most of our fellows are nonprofit sector, but they're all social change. They could have worked in the government of Mexico, for example.
So you also have students from Mexico, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
I know you have students from the South America, and Asia, from Middle Eastern countries. I met some of them there.
We had a Cuban who served at Planned Parenthood. We've had a Jamaican serve at a homeless shelter in Chicago. We have a woman from Aleppo, Syria, who's serving in New York right now, and she's very inspiring. But what's most inspiring is seeing the woman from Aleppo, Syria interact with the woman from Palestine and the young man from Mexico. And not only what they can learn from the United States and what we can learn from them, but what they can learn from each other
So
as
what's
well.
the common ground they seek in order for them to engage with a different nationality and different culture?
You know, these are all mission-driven people.
Mission-driven people.
They're mission-driven, and their mission may be empowering women in Pakistan, or it could be free speech in the Middle East. But they all believe that we have the ability to change the world, and that we can't do it alone. And they're looking for people who are willing to do it with them.
We have to work together.
Exactly.
We are stronger together.
Exactly.
So you work in the country administrations, and I'm sure you also helped work during the Obama administrations also, not necessarily just
Right.
from the outside. What do you think of this administration's and in terms of what you do in at-risk corps? Is that something they care about?
You know, I think
It's still
Right.
sort of, they have been only in business for about 90 days.
it's true. You know, I believe that global engagement is not really a partisan issue.
I would think you're right.
You know, when I served in State Department under President Bush, you know, he was one of the best advocates for fighting human trafficking overseas, which was the work that I was doing.
He was also an advocate of trying to get rid of the AIDS in Africa.
Absolutely, the work
And
he did in Africa was amazing. With
It
PEPFAR.
was amazing. There's no question. He was the fellow who went out after the 9/11 to the Islamic Center.
It's
A
absolutely
Republican president standing there.
right. So I don't think that engaging the world is a partisan issue. In fact, there's both progressive and conservative arguments for Atlas Corps. You know, on the conservative side, this is a model that's empowering leaders overseas to solve their problems. This is a business model to affect social change. We don't rely
Does
on.
it affect us in America, what is going on in Syria, and in terms of the human right, the minorities' rights, women's rights, and civil rights?
Absolutely. I mean, beyond just the ethical and moral argument, which I think is probably persuasive enough, there's even a business argument and a military argument that we need to be investing in allies. We need to be empowering individuals who share our values in these countries. And one way to do that would be to send someone overseas to try to teach them those values, but that's not the most effective way to do it. By bringing somebody here that we can learn from them and they can learn from us and they can go back to their country. You know, look, I don't think I'm going to solve Syria's problems, but I think a beer might. I think my fellow from Aleppo, Syria, will be able to go back home and make an impact in that country. And that's true around the world with the fellows that we have coming here. They're the best advocates to solve those challenges, and they just need a little bit of support, and that's what we're providing.
So when they come to our shores and see we're pulling out of the NATO, we're pulling out of the climate change, we have banned the Muslims, we're building a wall of hatred and bigotry from Mexico. The list goes on and on. What did they think of all these things? Is this the America they are used to? This America they think this is not the America. This is just the for this administration which is doing that. But that's not what binds them together.
You know, I was with the Atlas Corps Fellows both on Inauguration Day and also the day after during the Women's March. And their reflections always enlighten me. A fellow from Zimbabwe talked about how it was truly inspiring to see this transition of power because his entire life in Zimbabwe had been under one ruler. And it's just something that we take for granted in the United States, that there's free and fair elections, that there's a transfer of
which
power.
Which is also attacked here in terms of freedom of press and freedom of media and freedom of expression and freedom of faith.
Well, and we shouldn't take it for granted, but we do take for granted these issues. And so
well, that's part of our Constitution.
Right. Absolutely, but the Constitution is not a document that should be kept on the bookshelves. It's a living document.
It should be practiced.
Exactly. So when these fellows certainly have different political persuasions themselves and different perspectives, it's really interesting to see our country through their eyes, and both in what they see are the challenges, but also the real hope and promise of this country.
That's the best way to put it. Hope and promise.
Absolutely.
And potential and possibilities.
Absolutely.
So, if I interview you 2 years from now, Scott, maybe 3 years from now, what is your legacy and the vision for the Atlas Corpus?
You know, my vision for Atlas Corps is really based off that initial vision, that opportunity exists everywhere, talent exists everywhere in the world, but opportunity does not. I don't want that to be a sentence. I want that to be a cause for our existence. And I want in 2 or 3 years, not 100 people coming a year, but 1,000 people coming from around the world, that when a young person overseas, no matter what country they may be born in, can say, if I'm smart enough and I work hard enough and I'm talented enough, I can make a difference on a global scale. and that the fact that I was born with a Syrian or Mexican or Russian passport won't limit my potential to make a difference. And Atlas Core is one of the many vehicles that allows those people to make a difference.
To exploit their fullest potential regardless of
Exactly.
their color, creed, religion, race, background, and belief.
Exactly. I hope that we've helped knit a more connected world that empowers the most inspiring leaders to effect social change.
So, you want to send one of corporate fellow, somewhere in Washington, D.C., to my business that I run. How would you go about telling me that what's advantage to me is that I want to take your Atlas Core Fellow under my wing, under my umbrella in my organization?
Sure. Well, this is especially true for nonprofits, but even for businesses that are trying to make a difference in the world, we all know that diverse teams create better outcomes. So whether it's an international
So the diversity is a strength to our nation.
But not just, I mean, strength to our nation is absolutely true, but it's almost an esoteric statement. But taking it
We live in a global world.
We live in a global world, but even on a practical 15-person team, if you have a more diverse team, you've got a better outcome.
So the diversity is not just the color and creed, but the gender diversity, the opportunity diversity, and the list goes on and on.
Exactly.
And opportunity for, diversity for the ideas.
Exactly.
Because they do innovate when you have a diversity.
You know, we were talking to the Girl Scouts about taking an Atlas Core Fellow, and the woman at the Girl Scouts said, you know, Girl Scouts has traditionally been viewed as an organization that has white women and, you know, run by older white women. But the fact is, Girl Scout participants are not all white women. They reflect the beautiful diversity of our country. So she wanted to have an Atlas Core Fellow come on our team, not just because the diversity of religion or of faith or of race,
religion, yeah, right.
but also diversity of ideas.
That's what I was thinking.
And that's what we bring to the
diversity
team.
of the ideas, because
Exactly.
they become more productive, innovative, and creative.
Exactly.
If you give them the opportunity, they will explore their fullest potential to become an innovator, to be the best they can be.
So major nonprofits like CARE and Save the Children and UN Women take our fellows, and more local organizations
So
like
you said
Miriam's
the UN,
Kitchen.
United Nations also do that?
UN Women and U.S. Fund for UNICEF and the UN Foundation have all taken Atlas Core Fellows.
Okay, so UN Foundation, the
Yep.
one, okay, the one Turner was involved with it?
Yep, Kathy Calvin runs it
I
now.
know Kathy, I'm
Yep.
meeting with her in 2 weeks.
She's great. They've had lots of fellows. They had a fellow from Mexico who came and served on their team, who then the UN named one of the 17 best young leaders in the world. Her name is Terry. Terry started a nonprofit in India that had to do with promoting electrification in rural areas. Leader of Light is what it was called. She helped start one of those chapters. Terry is like so many of our fellows who can come to the UN Foundation that has a diverse team, that has diverse experiences, but bring her experiences from Mexico and India to strengthen the UN Foundation. And then through Atlas Core and through her own experiences and network, propels her on to an even more powerful career going forward. Atlas Core is Terry times 587 and should be Terry times 10,000. And that's what we're working towards.
So what your vision that you see it in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, you want to expand this thing to bring in no more people from a diverse country to come to America and learn who we are, and also go back and make a difference.
Exactly.
So you are, your organization is an opportunity creator.
Right. In fact, we're now sending Americans to serve in Colombia, to Australia, soon to India. It's going to be a multilateral exchange, but the real growth is going to be primarily bringing people here to the United States.
And you don't have any problem finding employment for these individuals that come from different parts of the world?
Sure. We don't really call it employment because it's a year of service. And it's not a work visa. They're volunteering.
But they pay for them. The
organizations pay, and those folks receive a stipend.
Okay.
But it's not employment. It's different. It's on-the-job training.
On-the-job training.
But no, so we don't have too much trouble finding candidates, but we're always looking for organizations that want diverse people to join their teams. And so they should go to atlascore.org and learn how an Atlas Core Fellow could benefit their team in advancing social issues that they care about.
So there's audience here, 500,000, 1 million. There's a lot of people who are watching it. It goes all over the world. Explain to them, what's your message for them, to the people who wants to be a social entrepreneur?
Sure. You know, I think being a social entrepreneur in many ways is like being a business entrepreneur. When you have that brilliant idea, you need to be fearless and relentless in pursuing it. And that even means fearless in asking people for help. That even means that that doesn't mean that you have all the answers in the world, but there are other folks out there who are willing to support you to help make it happen. And if you pursue with vigor, especially in the social entrepreneurship mindset, this mission to achieve a greater good, you can be successful. But it's really hard. And so you need to be resilient and
Strong.
And strong, exactly.
And vibrant.
And vibrant.
And you can make a difference.
Indeed.
So you want to make a difference. You want this Atlas Fellow to make a difference so they can impact, influence on the people's lives.
Look, I think the problems of the world are far too great to sit back passively and just complain about them.
No, obviously that's not going to solve the problem.
And I believe investing in individuals is the best way to affect social change. That it's individuals who solve challenges. It's individuals who come up with new solutions. We need to invest in them.
This is where you're going to get the exponential returns. That's what you believe in.
Exponential returns, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So I like what you're saying in terms of the Atlas Corporation's missions, goals, and objectives, and also what you're doing for the countries, for the countries that people come from all over the world to our shore.
Thank you.
I think that's a wonderful for them, wonderful for our country, because we are the recipient of their knowledge and experience, and so on and so forth.
It's a win-win.
So it is a win-win situation. And so thank you very much, Scott, for coming and sharing your ideas and your vision and values to the audience. And thank you for watching. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week.